If we're led to believe the latest statistics from National Mentoring Day, implementing a business mentor or coach pays significant dividends for your confidence and your bottom line as an entrepreneur. It found that 67% of businesses reported an increase in productivity due to a mentor. Meanwhile, 55% of businesses felt that mentoring had a positive impact on their profits. And finally, employees who received mentoring were promoted 5 times more often than those who did not receive mentoring at all. Nick Davies is a live performance and business coach who truly believes that all entrepreneurs have the intestinal fortitude in order to be successful if they're committed to putting the tools and people in place around them to provide them with an anchor of support, which allow business owners to create rituals that are non-negotiable, demand high standards for delivery, and always looking beyond and in yourself to take it to the next level. Davies joined me this week to discuss how we can all take our life and business to the next and most optimal level. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's this conversation. So Nick, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. It's terrific to see you, and I'm excited to be with you to talk business this morning. Great to be with you, buddy, and thank you for a few minutes.
Pleasure, you got it. I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, absolutely, buddy. So you are a business person that tells me that awareness is everything. So I'm wondering if you can explain your philosophy there, buddy.
Yeah, it's actually really simple, Kevin. If you don't know, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. It's everything starts with awareness. I believe that it's not everything, but it's absolutely where you need to start. Because if you can't see it, you can't do anything about it. So awareness for me is the start point, and oftentimes it's about really digging in and understanding like what's really true. We make so many assumptions about our business and our life because of pre-existing beliefs that other people have asked us to adopt, and oftentimes we can't see those things. So absolutely, you got to start with, am I really aware of what's going on? What's really true? Being dirt honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also say in order to live life to the fullest, or even to start to be happy, buddy, we have to work every day to be committed to gathering support around what makes what is important to us. So I'm wondering if you can tell me more.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, part of awareness, right? Are you really working on spending time on things that are actually important to you? It's easy to say yes to that, but have you really stood back and said, the things that I'm doing are the most important? Have you looked at your life and said, where in my life is most important? Or the categories of your life even, what is success in each category of your life? What's overall success in your life? And having a plan around that so you know that you actually are spending time on the things that are most important.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Nick, I don't know if you knew this, but last week was National Accessibility Awareness Week, buddy, and I was actually born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. And, outside of this podcast, buddy, I am committed to helping people promote diversity, equity, and inclusion for folks with disabilities when it comes to employment. So when we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion from a business perspective, how do you think we can better incorporate folks with disabilities? And overall, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you?
Oh, thank you so much. Great question. Really great to dig in on this because, again, for me, this talks to awareness, right? That's the starting point of it. It's understanding where are we in our world and where are we going for our individual selves? And then when we will have an area to go towards, whether that's a certain part of our life or whether it's in our business, it's starting to understand, well, okay, well, who else could be involved in that? What are the things that I want to do? And maybe some of the things that I don't want to do. And who else might be on their journey for the things that they want to do, which maybe fit into the spaces of the things that I don't want to do. And it's understanding that everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. And so that, for me, is really the key about diversity and inclusion, right? Equity and inclusion is about understanding that everyone has something to give. And what your strength is, you have two people with the same strength to your organization, that's in itself makes a weakness, right? Because here's an example. I'm on a focus right now to bring more coaches in to work with me at Pro as a coach because we're growing like crazy. And Coach Joe is one of our newest coaches here, and me and him connect and click so well. We're at different places in our life, but the way that we think is so similar. And that we can get off and start talking about how we can help people when we come up with the same answers a lot of time and just have like different perspectives on it. So it's really fun to work with him. And I also noted to him, I said, hey, Coach Joe, we've got to be careful because we get on so well. We're so well connected. It's easy for us to go down a path and start to get blind about some of the other things that we don't see because we're on a similar same path. That's why it's so important to have people that have different perspectives from you in any organization and all parts of your life. There's no wrong or right to that, of course. Everyone's got a different perspective. It's the collective of that allows us to impact the most people on this planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Nick, I'm also wondering your thoughts on your definition of mental clarity in business. And what does that mean to you?
Mental clarity. First of all, I believe that clarity is power. I often, I love this metaphor. I often think about it like, when you're unclear on something, really unclear, you can't even see that you're unclear on it. So it comes back to awareness for start. And then you get a bit of awareness, allows you to move forward a little bit. And sometimes you can think, oh, it's clear for me. It makes sense. I'm doing it. I'm moving forward. But it's kind of like those old TVs. Hey, Kevin, do you remember like the old standard definition TVs? Before
Yes, of course I do. Absolutely.
And sport was always interesting to watch on that. So like growing up in England, I used to watch football and the old standard definition TVs, and you can watch it and you go, it's fine. It's completely watchable. It feels like it's clear. And then someone shows you a high definition TV and you're like, oh my goodness, now it's clear. What was interesting is that like, you look at that and you can't go back to the old standard definition TV anymore. It's like, I can't even watch it. It's unwatchable. How could we ever watch it before? So sometimes what feels like it's clear might feel like it's clear, but it doesn't mean that there's not more layers of clarity available to you. Now we have 4K TVs and whatever else. So mental clarity really is in any given situation itself can be measured against that situation. But really it's the process for me of going, okay, where do I need to be clear? Well, how can I be even clearer? How can I create even more simplicity? Because complexity is the enemy of execution. So having clarity really as a foundation is knowing where am I and where am I going? And where am I on the journey? That will be the start of mental clarity in business for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Nick, I'm also wondering your perspective on how we maximize prosperity in business and set actionable goals to progress. How does prosperity in business look to you?
Well, Kevin, this is my jam. This is why I work with people day in and day out on understanding we need to have a process around this stuff. Obviously, I'm coming from a place where I live this, but I completely 100% certainty that everyone in business should have a coach. Me, pro-advisor coach, doesn't matter. Anyone somewhere, providing you've got a coach, because part of that process is understanding where are you going overall? What does winning look like in this month, in this quarter, in this year? Hey, it's a great time to think about that because we'll start relatively the start of June as we record this, which is the end of June is going to be the end of Q2 or also the end of H1, and we're starting the second half of the year. You've also got to know where you're going in 5 years or 10 years. Now, there's not a precision way of doing that. It's always a bit different depending on the individual, depending on the business. But you have to know where you're going at any given time, and you have to be able to measure that on a regular basis, weekly at minimum, so you can check in on it. I always think about the metaphor of flying across the country, right? If you fly from where I live in North Carolina, let's say you fly all the way over to California, it appears as though that flight is on the same trajectory, right? It's a straight line. But the reality is that plane is always off course. But it's the autopilot and the pilots, they're making sure that they're constantly course correcting. They're checking in all the time to make sure it stays as straight as possible. If you only check in once or twice in that whole flight, you're going to be up towards Canada or down towards Mexico and bouncing across the country. Right? So it's the checking in on it that allows us to get towards our goals. Because once you break goals down, they're very, very manageable, whatever it is. But it's using the impact of time to look at that frequently to get to where you want to go. And that is prosperity, however you look at it.
Yeah, and Nick, we just talked about prosperity and how to set yourself up for success in business. But no matter how hard you work, you will inevitably experience adversity. So how do you look at adversity and perseverance in business?
Yeah, I think the first part is, as you say, it is inevitable. Not to think about how do I avoid or how do I not experience. The first part is the right mindset to say this will happen. No matter how successful or not the case you may be, whatever that means to you, you are going to experience adversity. I think of it like seasons. It's cycles. Everything is cycles. So we start and we plant in spring and we create everything's available. We start putting seeds out there and we move to the summer. We're starting to see some things pop up. We want to cultivate that stuff. And we move to the fall and we start to reap some of the things that we do. And then we go to winter. And winter is a place where it's like dark, right? Where it's time to review, time to reflect, and we reset ourselves. And so knowing that we always in those seasons are so important. That's the biggest part about adversity, is knowing that it's coming. That's the biggest part because you want to protect yourself for it when it comes. So that would be absolutely the place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nick, I'm fascinated to ask you, where does your personal passion for the work that you do come from, buddy?
Thank you, Kevin. That's a great question. And it really hits me hard because before I was a coach, I spent almost 20 years working in banking, working for big banks all across the world. And I thought I was a person that never was passionate about their career. I was a show up, think of it like of a game and take what I can and give what I can back, but it wasn't really something I was passionate about. I just thought that's who I was. And there's a moment where I was like, that can't be good enough. Like there must be more than this. And that process for me going through all the way to coming to coaching was a long process. So part of what I get excited about, passionate about now is helping people squish that down a bit. And because I know what is available, and once you can kind of taste what's available, like there's no limits. I believe that there's no limits what we can do, regardless of what your background is and where you come from. Like everyone's got a different starting place. But the point is, like, there's so much available out there, and that's what I get passionate. I'm passionate about being passionate about where people are and what they can do. There are no limits, and I know once we apply the processes and the principles and the concepts, it's amazing what we can achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people that everyone's portrait of success is different, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Success to one person is not success to another person. And there's some danger in that. And there's also some utility in that, because if you can see someone in your particular given area of industry, let's say, or place of life where you see something and go, wow, that will be something, will be an idea perhaps of what I want. You can model success. You can do the things that that person's done to go towards that success. But that's also dangerous as well. That's kind of like the science of it, because the art is the fulfillment part. And so if you go and do what someone else has done, you will get there, that same level of success, whatever that means, but not necessarily fulfillment. So that to your point, Kevin, that you've got to make sure that you honor your picture of success.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nick, tell me, when you think of creating an actionable to-do list, what do you think that vision of that is in your head? I'm curious.
Well, yeah. Well, a couple of things straight away that jump out at me. First of all, I would never have a to-do list because I at least wouldn't call it that, right? Because a to-do list is something that never gets done because there's always things to add on to it. Hey, how many times it happened to me, and I wonder if it's happened to you, but how many times have you got to a place where you've had a fantastic day and you've crossed off like a whole bunch of things on your to-do list, only to realize that you've added twice as many on the bottom? Right, so the concept of a to-do list itself, I'd like to throw out and just call an action plan or an action menu. Think in terms of what results are rather than to-dos. We don't want to mistake activity for progress, but we do need to do activity to get progress. So there's a balance to be had. So that's the concept I think about it. And secondly, it wouldn't be in my head. It would always, and everything's going to be written down or at least in a digital fashion. So what does that look like? To give you some to really dig into the answer of this. For me, that looks like understanding what's the most important result for that day or that week. If I'm looking at the beginning of my week and I'm looking at whether you're planning for your following week on a Friday afternoon or a Sunday evening or a Monday morning, what are the most important outcomes for that particular week? And once you define the outcomes, knowing what success actually is, it's much easier to define the action plan towards those outcomes. That's the starting point for everything. And obviously there's so many nuances to it, but that's where we absolutely must start.
Yeah, and Nick, I know that you live in North Carolina, but I can detect a London accent, buddy. So tell me, what do you think is the biggest difference from living in London to the United States, and what do you miss most about back home, buddy?
You're full of awesome questions, Kevin. Thank you very much. I came to the States via some traveling and living in Asia for a few years. So the immediate contrast I got was from living in the Philippines to moving to Jacksonville, Florida, which was very interesting to me, to be in a very, very densely populated place to a much more wide and open American feel place. And, I'd always wanted to live in America. There was something that was pulling me to live here. And I don't know if that's part of the awareness of it, to go back to one of my favorite things there, or understanding what the American dream was, or for me, it just felt like more possibility, more places to go, more available to create what you want. So it was like an instinctual pull, and it still feels like that to me. I still feel like there's no limit to possibilities. I believe that in human nature, for everywhere you go, the place here feels like that to me, more open, more possibilities. And so I'd suggest certainly from North Carolina to London, the big difference is, and you can much easier compare London to New York, let's say, in terms of a densely populated city, and there's some differences there. But I think from a overall perspective, it's that mindset of anything's possible, and that's what really jumps out for me. And what do I miss in London? Well, actually, I took me and my wife and our two daughters. We went back there in March. The first time I've been there really as a family for about 5 years, and so it was really great to go see my parents and my brother and some of my friends there as well, and have them to get experience of it. I think the small difference in culture, and the longer and longer I live in places, you can just see those things pop out. What's the one thing? Well, I don't know. It's the people. It's allowing the different nuances of people to create more and more together. I think that's one of the biggest impactful things of living in a different place, or indeed just traveling, is to get to see a different spin on things, and that's what I think allows us for a lot of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just talked about growth, Nick. So I'll ask this next question this way: how do you think being coached in business can provide you both a growth and guidance when you're trying to navigate the business world?
Yeah. I think about coaching in business or indeed any part of your life as very similar to coaching in sports. You know, in sports, you're on the field and you're playing the game of your life, like your game of your life, your game of your business, and you're in there, like you're blocking and tackling. It's intense. You're in the game. You're playing, and the coach is sitting on the sidelines, and the coach is sitting there super chilled out. They get to see instant replays. They've got a playbook. You know, they've got assistants themselves, and they can see things over and over. They just have a different perspective. You know, coaching in business, coaching in life is much the same as that. The big difference that is always needs calling out, and this in itself is a great awareness, is that when you're coaching in sport, the rules of winning in that sport are already defined. How you beat the team, more points, right? In a certain time lot, and then you beat enough teams, you get to go to the Super Bowl, let's say, and you do that, and then you win the award for that year, let's say. Now, in business, you've got to define what winning looks like. Most people aren't winning in business because they don't know what winning looks like. You've got better to ring the bell and say we won this year, right? And that's getting really precise about what that is and tracking and measuring. And so that it's a combination of all of those things. It's so important to understand where you are and start to grow. So it's the science of success we already talked about, which is like the consulting side of it, if you will, like the tracking and measuring what's real, looking at the numbers. And then the coaching side is really what I call the under the water line, which is if you think about the visual of an iceberg, you know, 20% of the iceberg is above the water. Most of it we don't see. The part that got those poor people on the Titanic. That's where the real growth comes from, to answer your question, Kevin. It's understanding how we think, understanding what we believe, what holds us back, what limits us, and where we get the resistance to moving forward and create the version of ourselves we want to create, or indeed the business that we want to create.
Yeah, and Nick, my final question for you this morning has to do with how you celebrate the wins in life and how you want your legacy to be defined, both personally and professionally.
Oh, awesome stuff. Celebrating wins is so important. It's so important. And that's a big difference between English and American culture. I remember I remember being in a place when I was doing some of my training years ago about and understanding the importance of celebrations. And from an English perspective, and it's not just culture, of course, other people have the same thought, but is that we don't really celebrate stuff. We just complain about things. Misery loves company. But we have to celebrate stuff because we can only build on success. And if you can look at the things that have gone well, no matter how small, that puts us in a better place to go do even better next time. So it's so important to celebrate and win. Sometimes that means jumping up and down. Sometimes that means going and doing something. Sometimes it just means going, man, look what I just did. What's the journaling I did this morning? What's the reflection I can take? What's something I can share with someone? And share things and amplify it. So for me, it doesn't matter how you celebrate, it's just the acknowledgement of you doing something that you said that you were going to do and really building that personal integrity. That's what's really, really important. And just sharing it with someone, because when you share with someone, you magnify and you amplify that thing. So whoever that person is, go share it, because it's not only magnifying it, amplifying it for you, it's doing the same for them, and you're spreading that win and that energy throughout the world. And legacy for me, man, here at Provider's Coach, we're on a mission to relieve pain and suffering in the workforce. On course to become the most sought after coaching and consulting firm in the US. And it's all about doing as much of that as we possibly can, right? So I'm building a huge coaching team here so we can impact businesses and individuals to be the best version of themselves. That's it. To get to that place where they can give themselves a lot of grace, where they can give back, and their business is run by themselves. They're in a place where they are thinking about legacy. They're not in the critical path of supporting their businesses, so they can give back. I just got off a call before we started to record this today, Kevin, with a young financial advisor that I work with, someone who he works with, and I just wanted to spend some time with him. It's like, now I've got more and more people in my team. It's a place where he's in a place where he can invest to get a coach and get started, which is so cool to me, because that's what the legacy is about. It's about giving back and creating scale and creating leverage from doing that. Certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. There's strength in numbers, isn't there?
Absolutely. And especially in business, what happens is you think you want to do it all yourself, but you've got to create leverage, right? You've got to create room for the next set of people, because they can't step into that until you step out of it, right? And absolutely, it's amazing what we can do. 1 and 1 equals 3 for sure.
Absolutely. You know, Nick, I'm sad that our time together is coming to an end this morning, but before it does, tell me what's the best way people can get connected with you if they're so inclined to do that.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. You find me in a few different places. I'd like to offer your listeners and viewers an opportunity to see my newsletter, which I send out weekly. You go to achievers-mindset.com/tools. Some tools there which I find productive, and some of those are around the action plan stuff I just mentioned as well, that you asked a question on. So certainly achievers-mindset.com/tools. You can go see me. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on TikTok now. My marketing team is doing some awesome job pushing me to go crank out some TikToks. Coach Nick Davies on that as well. So I'm building that. But yeah, absolutely. Hopefully your listeners, viewers will find some value in my weekly newsletter and that tools offering as well.
Fantastic. Well, Nick, I really enjoyed our time together talking about business prosperity and growth, buddy. You worked in the space, and Tom, on my behalf, it's most appreciated, buddy. And I want to thank you for being here this morning.
Appreciate you, Kevin. Thank you for doing what you do, giving back. And I often say, people are either an example or a warning, and both of those things are valuable, but you are certainly an example. And I appreciate the energy you're bringing and the difference you're making. That's awesome.